That's why we're seeing Jim Letton, before obviously his resignation, going after political corruption here in New Orleans?
No, that's just Jim Letton's personality. He just happened to have maybe a larger bait and therefore, catch bigger fish. But the other, as Elliott pointed out, to think that there is no political corruption in the Western District of Louisiana and very little district, which includes Baton Rouge, is just to be in denial. We lucked out with Jim Letton. It probably won't ever happen again. So we need to start focusing on our local district attorneys, our local sheriffs, and start insisting that they be the federal prosecutor and the FBI. So, and I think the FBI is perfectly willing to cooperate with them, but they have to invite them in. So the resources are there. The will to put away people for political corruption at the local level simply does not exist because we don't demand it.
Elliott, is Louisiana much different from the rest of the country when it comes to political corruption? I know that there have been studies out there that put Chicago as maybe just a little bit ahead of New Orleans and Louisiana in terms of the number of convictions. Compare and contrast Louisiana to the rest of the country when it comes to political corruption.
Eric, I've looked at the studies. I've actually read how the Center for Public Integrity, for example, goes around, comes up with their rankings. And here's my problem with that. The best way, and you've referenced it, the best way to objectively measure a particular place's propensity to corruption is to measure investigations and or indictments and or convictions. And here's my problem with that. I think the real issue is how much corruption is there that never, ever makes it to any of those categories. And that's why I think we have a problem here based on any other information, admittedly anecdotal largely, but it's also from media reports. I think we have way, way more cases of routine political corruption that never sees any part of the legal process. And I say that in the context of the often quoted, and I quote it, some people quote me, some people quote CB, we have a systemic problem here. This is a place where this kind of behavior is nurtured. We have specific devices in place in Louisiana, like the history of the Ethics Administration, like what Bobby Jindal did to ethics enforcement, civil or not, like the constitutional prohibition of the Attorney General independently pursuing public corruption cases where not invited in by the local DA. What I'm trying to say is we have to do anything about it. We have made sure by statute, by constitutional provision, by culture, by the nurturance of all the things that cause corruption, we give it great aid and comfort in Louisiana. We have lowered the bar, as I say, not laughing, so low in Louisiana that cockroaches can jump it, and everybody knows it.
CB, would you agree with Elliott? We've created a system of government that again allows this type of legacy of political corruption.
Yeah, and let me take another a little side on that, and it's partly cultural, and by definition, you can't change a culture; you can only make it extinct. But let me tell you what I learned. I had the opportunity in the 80s and 90s to do a lot of national media interviews, and it involved gambling, but it ultimately came back to corruption because that was my primary concern, was political corruption and the economic impact. And so in private conversations with these national reporters who had literally reported all over the country, and corruption in various states, I would say, well, we're already the most corrupt state in the union. And they would actually laugh in my face. And they say, CB, Louisiana is not the most corrupt. He said, you can't even hold a candle in New Jersey, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and places like that. And we've seen that to a great extent now. What they said that distinguished us from all the other states, and these were all at different occasions, different people, different networks, different backgrounds, and they all had the same answer to my comment, we're the most corrupt state in the union. They said the difference in Louisiana is, which is going to what Elliott said, is the tolerance for corruption in Louisiana exceeds the tolerance in any other state. Look how long it took. It didn't take any time to take down the governor of Illinois. I mean, it was done in a matter of months. He was gone.
Yes, no doubt.
It's us. It's the tolerance we have, and I can't explain it any more than I can explain apathy. It's just there. Maybe it's part of our culture. Elliott and I grew up in North Louisiana. The culture up there is definitely different than South Louisiana. Not to say there isn't corruption there. It's just that the tolerance for the people up there are a little bit less than I think in South Louisiana.
CB Forgotston, Elliott Stonecipher, our guests. We're live at Katie's Restaurant and Bar, 3701 Iberville in the heart of Mid-City. Come on down and join us. Again, we are open until 9 o'clock tonight. We take a quick break. Eric Asher with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Again, you can listen live, download by podcast at Eric Asher in Mid-City. That's right, Katie's Restaurant and Bar, the quintessential New Orleans neighborhood restaurant, 3701 Iberville at North Telemachus, a block off the Canal Street streetcar line. Great homemade food for you right here at Katie's. We'll go over that menu for you as we get into the top of the hour. Elliott Stonecipher, also CB Forgotston, join us on the program. We're talking about political corruption here in Louisiana. You know, Elliott, the media has seemed to have taken the prominent role, especially down here in South Louisiana, in the New Orleans area, of going after political corruption, trying to uncover political corruption. You've got a lot of bloggers that are out there that are faceless and nameless, who have information, who are using the internet as an opportunity to get the word out on what's going on in terms of political corruption. While Jim Letton was in office, between Bernazani and Letton, I think people felt that they had someone that they could go to be able to drop a dime on those that were stealing from the public. What do you feel the role of media, social media, is in this state right now in terms of uncovering political corruption?
Eric, I think that the most direct tie-in in that context is this. If we leave the whole business of making proper authorities aware of public corruption, if we leave it up to the people that we expect should handle it, for reasons we've already discussed this morning, there's a very good chance nobody will ever know. Same thing with the Ethics Administration, and I want to make this point just to add to the point I made earlier about nurturing public corruption. Right now, if you or I or CB file a complaint, say we don't know anything about the Ethics Administration, we just know that's where a local DA told us that the thing we called him about was supposed to go. So we write the letter to the Ethics Administration. There is a law on the books in Louisiana that says if you file a complaint, you are not to ever discuss publicly in any way that you did it, and if you do, you can be found guilty of a misdemeanor. Now, that's a law on the books in Louisiana, put on the books by the people who far disproportionately get reported to the Ethics Administration, state legislators. Now, if bloggers, if CB, if many of the others that we have identified are not using the internet to at least make the public aware of how many corrupt acts are going on at any given time, then most of whatever is prosecuted would not be. And I got to go one step further. The news media is no longer in the position that it was 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago to do this. Frankly, news media sources are more compromised today than at any time in my career. They have more economic pressure. They have more, therefore, political pressure born of the economics. And there are fewer and fewer of them that are doing what you are describing and I'm discussing. So we may not be having a great lot of luck at what we're trying to do, but if it weren't for this, I tell you what, 90% of what we know is going on would never have been reported.
I would agree with you. CB, why don't you pick this up? You've got a great website that, again, you pontificate almost on a daily basis on what's happening here in the state. Obviously, being down here from New Orleans, you've seen the transformation of the news media post-Katrina and going after political corruption. I'm not saying we didn't have some great investigative reporters in this city pre-Katrina, because we did. But there was it seemed like a transformation post-Katrina, whether it was a newspaper, whether it was blogs, whether it was electronic media, of going out and exposing political corruption.
Well, I have to first of all, I want to echo what Elliott said. The social media, the internet, and the commercial media is the only game in town. I mean, that's it when it comes to bringing these criminal activities to the forefront, especially now that Jim Letton is not in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But then again, that only covers the Eastern District. I'm fortunate to have been in his district and even up here in Tangipahoa Parish. But the only way to get anything done now is through these resources to get the public riled up about the corruption and ultimately putting pressure on the people who have the ability to prosecute. And I want to point out one thing. Despite the great job Jim Letton did, all political corruption was not under his jurisdiction by federal law. In other words, there was a limit to what he could prosecute. So those district attorneys who, in the Eastern District, who would defer to Jim Letton, were allowing a huge group of corrupt officials to escape scrutiny altogether, because Letton's office, or any U.S. Attorney's Office, didn't have the jurisdiction over all forms of corruption and crime. People just assume, well, public official so-and-so did something wrong, so Jim Letton will come in, or the U.S. Attorney. They don't have the jurisdiction. They are limited by federal law to what they can use. Jim Letton did an excellent job of pushing that to its limit.
Eric, can I add a point here?
Absolutely, Elliott.
I want to be sure we get this one in. I've never said anything about it before, and I've certainly never had an opportunity for CB to respond. To make his point dramatically and factually, and I will be careful what I say, because, as CB knows very well, whatever interaction any citizen has with federal authorities is not something that ought to be just simply discussed and without discretion. So let me try the best I can. Most people can't imagine this, but it is true. While there is a criminal malfeasance statute in Louisiana law, which in many, many cases, by the definition of that statute, it best covers much of the local corruption that we all try to deal with and live through and past. That statute, state statute, is excellent for many, 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 many corruption cases. The federal government has no such law. No U.S. attorney has a malfeasance law like Louisiana's criminal malfeasance law. So they have to find something like a Hobbs Act violation under the federal law, That goes back to the 1930s. I think it was originally put on the books as it related to various kinds of corruption involving the literal purchase, if you will, of the services of an elected official, maybe even prohibition related. If it's not a Hobbs Act violation, they've got to find a RICO case, which is extraordinarily difficult to prosecute. So here we are with many, maybe a strong majority of corrupt practices in Louisiana, served best for prosecutorial reasons by a great state statute we have in Louisiana for criminal malfeasance. And guess what? Our sheriffs and our DAs, for reasons we've already discussed, do not pursue those cases. When you take those great criminal malfeasance cases under Louisiana law to the feds, they will look at you and say, you do know that's a state statute. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the person who's looking at them and they're speaking to has to say, yes, I do. Can't you find some way? Well, yeah, we have a way. Your sheriff, your DA, and if your DA wants to pass it to the Attorney General, the State Attorney General. This is all what I mean when I talk about nurturing. If you're going to put the criminal malfeasance in Louisiana law, why would you take sheriffs and DAs and protect them somehow from pursuing the use of that statute?
CB, would you like to piggyback on that?
Yes, I want to say that Elliott hasn't heard me react. He is absolutely 100% correct. I'm glad he made that mistake, because I haven't. And I will add to that, to my personal knowledge, the former district attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish, Doug Morrow, is the only district attorney that I recall ever attempting to bring a criminal malfeasance charge against a public official. It was not successful because all he can do is bring charges. He can't convict them. But he's the only one, to my knowledge, and I'm sure people will call in incorrect, and there are other district attorneys that will say that. But to my personal knowledge, the only one that has ever pursued that charge against a public official. And it is, as Elliott said, it is very powerful. It's right there. It is all-encompassing. And I look it up often, and many times, you noticed on some of my commentaries, I will point out that it is a violation of the Criminal Malfeasance Act. But nobody ever pursues it.
And Eric, I will add one other point. Just as Doug Morrow, and I'm well aware of what CB is saying, have a tremendous amount of respect for Doug Morrow, and mainly in this very context. That's where the respect came from. But I want to add this, too. And many of us have seen it, so I'll be the one that says something. CB may say so also. The other problem that we have is, what if your local sheriff and your local DA don't get along? What if they are politically opposed, even if not personally opposed? Mm-hmm. What if your local sheriff is a Republican? Your local DA is a Democrat? That means they're beholden to completely opposite people for campaign finance, for example. Well, the sheriff can do the investigation. Let's say that the sheriff does it with the state criminal malfeasance statute, which, by the way, is a felony, and the convictions, the possible sentences, including restitution where money is concerned, are stiff. You could really, really create some fear if you started using it. If your sheriff can't get your DA to prosecute, then your sheriff learns very quickly, I'm not doing this anymore. And it happens. It has happened recently to my personal knowledge.
Well, I agree with Elliott, and I don't want to just go after the sheriff. I want to remind everybody that police chiefs, whether elected or appointed, also have jurisdiction in their geographical areas over state laws. They don't have to depend on the sheriff. A police chief or a policeman can bring charges for malfeasance. And we just don't ever think about that, and we don't ask. And when we elect, particularly when we have elected police department or chiefs, and particularly in the rural areas, we never make that an issue.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us today and for giving us your thoughts and your expertise on what's happening here in Louisiana when it comes to political corruption. I think we've learned a lot from you guys today, and I continue to thank you for all your hard work in exposing political corruption and what's happening here in the state of Louisiana.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Elliott.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, CB. Of course, CB Forgotston, you can check him out on Twitter and follow him at CB Forgot. And, of course, his website is Forgotston.com. Elliott, from time to time, does his commentaries. And, of course, you can usually check out those commentaries on CB's website as well. Eric Asher with you till 1 o'clock this afternoon. We are live at Katie's Restaurant and Bar, 3701 Iberville at North Tillamook.